Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today, we're checking out the latest audio interface from Avid. Let's get started. Today we're looking at the Mbox Studio, the latest audio interface from Avid. Now the Mbox name has been around for a while, but this is the latest iteration, and it's by far the most comprehensive, the most versatile, and the most flexible of the Mbox family that we've seen to this point. It really resembles a console in the way that it's set up, and it's great for everything from recording, editing, mixing, mastering music, to live streaming, podcasting, making beats. It's awesome for guitar players. It's a really great centerpiece for a studio because it includes so many features. Let's take a closer look. The Mbox Studio is a 21 by 22 audio interface, giving us tons of simultaneous inputs and outputs that are available for whatever we want to do. Those can be microphone inputs, line level inputs, instrument level inputs, line level outputs, headphone outputs, monitor outs. We're going to take a close look at the full complement of connections on this box. But basically it covers everything that you need, including reamping. There's a direct reamp out on the front that you could route right into an amplifier or an effects pedal. We've got premium A to D or analog to digital and D to A or digital to analog conversion. So great sound quality with this, and also very nice sounding preamps. One of the big benefits of the preamps that are in this is that they're variable impedance. So they work with a wide range of microphones, and you can really tune the response of the preamp to match the microphone. Likewise, there are two instrument inputs, and those also have variable input impedance. So you can set those up to match with your guitar's pickups perfectly. We have a complete monitor section that supports 2 sets of monitors and 2 sets of headphones, each with an independent mix. And we also have onboard comfort, reverb, and delay for when you're tracking. And that runs on processors that are inside the Mbox Studio, so there's no load on your computer and no latency associated with those. All those features and functions are controlled from the front panel, but also from the Mbox Control software app for Mac and Windows that comes with the unit. And this gives you comprehensive control over all the routing, all the setup, all the configuration, all the features right inside your computer as you're using the Mbox Studio. It also comes with a nice suite of software as well, which we'll talk about in just a bit. Now you might be wondering if this is a Pro Tools only interface coming from Avid, but it's not. It actually supports any DAW that might be running on your Mac or Windows computer. So let's take a tour of the hardware, and then we'll come back and look at the Mbox Control app. As I mentioned, we're set up with a desktop form factor here. It almost looks like a console. It's sort of split into 2 sections. On this side, we have our input controls, and on this side, we have our monitor section or output controls. We have 2 inputs on the front, 2 on the back. Our line level connections are on the back. We also have our headphone connections with their associated volume controls right here on the front panel. So these front panel inputs can accept microphone level with variable impedance, line level, or instrument level also with variable impedance. So these are very versatile. You set the gain for your inputs with the large knob, and you select which input you're working on by pressing that knob. If you press and hold, you can scroll through. On the upper left, we have our preamp control features. 48 volt phantom power on and off. We can select the type of input, mic, line, or instrument. Select the impedance that we want. We can also pad the input down if our signal is overly hot to prevent distortion, and we can link channels together as well. An interesting function that's available up here is Bluetooth compatibility. I didn't mention it earlier, but the Mbox Studio actually supports Bluetooth in and out, stereo signal in and out, and you pair that using the button here at the top for input. So this could be accepting input from your iPhone or another playback device. Likewise, on the output, we've got a Bluetooth button, so we can send Bluetooth out of this. You could play mixes on your car if you're close enough, or through a set of AirPods or whatever you might be using. So we have full Bluetooth support as well. As I mentioned, the large knob controls gain, and we have an indicator for the amount of gain we're applying right here, so we can clearly see what we're doing. We have meters for the inputs, and right here across the bottom of the center section, we have 4 assignable buttons. Those can be routed to a variety of different functions using the Mbox Control software. On the right-hand side, we have our monitor section. So we have a large monitor level control. We have 2 sets of monitor outs available on the back panel, main and alt, and we select those by pressing the large button. You can also set up one of your digital outputs as a monitor out as well if you've got digital inputs on your monitors. And as I mentioned, we can route out a Bluetooth as well. We can link all our monitor outputs using this switch, and in that case, they'll all be set to the same volume level, so as you move from monitor to monitor to monitor, you aren't getting jumps in volume level. We can mute the monitors, we can dim the monitors, we can mono them to check phase compatibility. And we've also got built-in talkback, so the talkback engages here, the mic is down here. As we'll see in a bit, you could also assign that talkback to a foot switch. And you can set that up for a couple of different modes of operation depending on how you want to use it. Rounding things out on the top of the unit, we've got stereo output meters. This button actually opens the Mbox Control software, as we'll see. And there's even a built-in instrument tuner that's inside the Mbox Studio. I mentioned earlier that 2 of the inputs are here on the front. They accept mic, line, and instrument. This is also where we have our reamp output. Now this is a high impedance output that can route straight into a guitar amplifier, a bass amplifier, or into an instrument pedal, a guitar pedal or a bass pedal. Then you could bring that back in through the preamps. So this allows a lot of versatility for capturing a dry signal, routing it back out through an amplifier and getting exactly the tone that you want after the fact. Again, as I mentioned, we have two headphone outputs here on the front. Each has its own volume control, and those can each be set up with its own independent mix. So you could have one for yourself as the engineer and another for, say, a vocalist when you're tracking, so they can hear exactly what they want. And part of that is hearing the comfort reverb, which we'll look at when we look at the Mbox Control app. On the back panel, we have the remainder of our inputs, and we also have our line level outputs and two additional line level inputs. The cool thing here is you can actually configure those line outputs and line level inputs as an effects loop, so you could send out and come back in with effects processors that are in the loop with no latency. Expanding our I/O capabilities, we have 8-channel ADAT optical in and out. That could also be switched to be 2-channel SPDIF optical in and out. And we have coaxial SPDIF stereo in and out as well. And we round out the back panel with 5-pin MIDI in and out. Our final connection is the USB-C connection for hooking up to your Mac or your PC. One other function I want to mention on the back panel, and that's that we have two foot switch or expression pedal inputs. Now these can be set up for a variety of different things. As I mentioned, you could use one, say, as a foot switch to engage talkback, but they can be MIDI expression pedals, MIDI switches. They can also control different parameters and settings, so there's a lot you can do with those two inputs. Now let's take a look at the Mbox Control app that comes with the Mbox Studio. Now this is where we can really get in to the parameters, the various mixes we can create, and all the routing possibilities with the Mbox Studio. So Mbox Control runs on Mac and PC, and as you can see, the bulk of it is basically dedicated to mixing. Now I'm going to bring a microphone in here. I've got an Audio-Technica BP40 so that we can see some levels and you'll hear a little bit of audio as it passes through the mixer. But the way things are set up, across the top, we have our 21 inputs. So our 4 microphones, our line inputs, Bluetooth, SPDIF, 8 ADAT channels, and then our talkback mic is the 21st input. On the bottom, we have our 22 outputs that are arranged in stereo pairs in this case. And we can also separate those out into mono, so we can work on the individual channels if we want to. The beautiful thing with Mbox Control is that each of these outputs can have a completely separate mix. So we can have one mix that's feeding the main outputs, a completely different mix feeding the alternate outputs, which also are mirrored to the Bluetooth outputs. We can have a separate mix for each of the headphone outs, SPDIF, and so on. So we can have up to 11 separate mixes going simultaneously. To do that, you simply select the output you want. So here I've got my main output selected, and then we'll turn up the channel for the particular signal we want to monitor. So in this case, my microphone's coming in, input number 4, and it's being routed to the main outputs. The audio feeding our cameras is here on line 1 and 2. So let's go ahead and turn that up. You can see that the colors on the sliders change to match the color of the mix that we're creating. We can create completely separate mixes. So we can turn up different channels here that are feeding our line output, switch back to our main output, and have a completely different mix. So lots of versatility here. In addition, we can bring either 8 mono or 4 stereo lines back from our DAW, and that's here in the center, this internal 1, 2 through 8. Now in this case, basically those outputs, let me switch over to Pro Tools here, are fed here from our channels. So we can see internal 1, 2, internal 3, 4, and so on. So if I play Groove Cell, go back over to Mbox Control, now Groove Cell is coming in here on internal 1 and 2. So if I bring that up, it's now feeding my main outputs. I could also feed that to my line outputs that are feeding our cameras. So you should be able to hear that now. Okay, great. Let's go back over to Pro Tools and stop that playback. But this is what allows you to overdub with no latency. Because you can create these different mixes, you can bring tracks back, you can do your overdubbing very easily, but it's also what allows us to do loopback mixing if you're doing a podcast or if you're streaming. So we can loop back through from whatever software you're using. It might be music playback, it might be a DAW, it might be something else that's playing back, coming in these internals, route out through our different outputs and record that back into our DAW. Allows you to loop those signals in and then talk on top of those, have an interview with sound effects, with music playing in the background, and so on. But the mixer doesn't stop there. We also have EQ for each of our inputs. That's right here on the left side of the screen. So if we turn that on, we have a 4-band EQ that we can set up. We can choose to either just monitor that EQ, or we can also send that EQ into our DAW if we prefer. But there's more yet. There also are 2 effects processors available. So here's our send for each channel. We can set that to be either pre-fader or post-fader. So if we bring that up, now the signal is feeding out of channel 4. You can see it's being fed in to the effects. If we switch over to the Avid effects, this is where the signal is coming in. It passes through a delay, passes through a reverb, and then comes back out here. So this is the master return level. And again, we can route that to each of our different outputs. So we can create a separate mix there as well for when we're overdubbing. So we have a delay here. Check. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have full control over all the parameters for that delay. And we also have a reverb. Check. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, we have full parameter control, several different types of reverb we can choose among. On the lower left of the screen is our monitor control section, and this duplicates what's on the hardware Mbox Studio. We can mono our outputs, we can mute, we can dim, we have our talkback, and so on. We can also choose our different monitor outputs, main, alternate, and so on. At the top of the screen, we have some of the settings for Mbox Control. And these include sample rate, the clock source, and so on. You set those up using the preferences. Here's our clock source. Here's our sample rate. We can set up monitor switching. We can mono our headphone outputs, and so on. These are basically set it and forget it type of settings. Across the top is where we set up the function for those 4 assignable switches on the front panel of the Mbox Studio. So for example, switch number 1 is set up to solo. When we press and hold that, we can also assign it to a different function. So for example, I can set that to where we press and hold the first switch and it mutes the main monitor output. And we can continue doing the same thing for those other 4 switches as well. This is also where we set up the function of the foot switch inputs on the Mbox Studio. Now, those can be assigned to no action, they can be an expression pedal over MIDI, they can be foot switch over MIDI, or they can be an Mbox action, meaning they control some setting inside the Mbox. And those are independent for those 2 switches. We can also access the instrument tuner from here inside Mbox Control, set up loopback, and we can also save all of our settings as presets and instantly recall those. Now, if you're doing a lot of repetitive sessions, or say you're doing a podcast every week, you could create a mixer setup for that podcast and recall it, be ready to go right out of the box by just clicking the particular preset that you want. So Mbox Control is really the hub for controlling all the features, all the routing, and all the functions of the Mbox Studio. You can do pretty much everything you need from the front panel of the unit itself, but having that deep software control lets you go even further. And the beauty of it is, with all those separate mixes, is you can set up a latency-free mix for whatever output you want. For your speakers, for your headphones, for your talent, for loopback when you're podcasting, streaming, whatever you're doing, it's very easy to manage all that from Mbox Control, and it works very transparently along with your DAW to set up all those monitoring paths. Finally, let's mention that the Mbox Studio comes with a free copy of Pro Tools Studio, and it also includes a free copy of Sibelius Artist. And you get the Mbox Studio Ignition Pack, which includes a wide variety of amp emulation plugins, effects plugins, content for creating music, all you need to get started using your Mbox Studio to make music, to record, to mix, to podcast, to stream, whatever you're doing, that software is going to help you get started right out of the box. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Mbox Studio. I'm very impressed with this audio interface. It sounds great, very easy to use. I like the way it looks like a console on my desktop, and the Mbox Control software is so easy to use and gives you so much power. It's a fantastic package for musicians, for engineers, for producers, podcasters, live streamers, whatever you're doing. It makes a great solution for your studio. Super comprehensive, flexible, versatile, and it sounds great. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.